Hi, this is Pete Lyons with Let's Play Salesforce, and it is time to kick off spoilers for the latest release. That's right, Spring 19 is now available in pre-release environments, and we get to check out all the cool stuff it has to offer. So before we get into that, I do want to say that I just got back from Einstein Analytics behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Ketan and David and the entire team for putting this together and letting us see how what everything looks like behind the curtain in the kitchen. It was really cool. We got to sit in on a sprint review. We got to provide our feedback. It's so amazing that the dedication that this team has to the community and the willingness that they have to listen to what it's like from our perspectives, and not just me, the hardcore builder, but there was people from all across the ecosystem that are very hands-on with the technology, that can speak to the perspectives of what is it like for an ISV to be working with the product. What is it like for an admin that has 10,000 users? What is it like for somebody who's building dashboards every day? And it was really great to have that open dialogue. So I really wanted to say thanks, and we got to see a ton of spoilers for this release and beyond. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. It's not even technically winter yet, and we are going to be reviewing spring. So let's let that be good enough, and let's jump in to the first round of new spoilers. So I'm logged into my trusty GS0 org, and in this one I'm not Batman, I'm a kitty cat surfing on a slice of pizza. And first thing I notice is an extremely minor bug that I'm sure they'll have patched pretty quickly. Above embedded dashboards, we are seeing Insights buoy root. This might not actually be from the analytics team. It could be something involving Lightning app pages. I'm not 100% sure. The only reason I pointed out at all is kind of a nostalgia. Anybody remember prior to Spring 16, we had to go to insights/lenses.apexp to be able to edit our dashboard JSON. That's because prior to being called Wave and Einstein Analytics, it had a number of different names throughout its evolution, and one of those was Insights. And we do still see the existence of this in a couple of different places in the code base, including the names of the objects that actually stored data sets. So, fun little nostalgia moment, minor bug, not a big deal. Moving on, now we're going to take a look at some of the enhancements to the setup menu. So the setup options for analytics have been completely redone, total facelift here, and this is under the direction of the team led by Katie Augustus, who is responsible for the Einstein Analytics Learning app, the Einstein Analytics Learning Adventure app, as well as all of the different embedded tutorial content that we see directly within the platform now. So the setup menu options are a lot more focused on giving you access to the information that you need to be able to configure it instead of just the settings that we previously had. But one thing that I do notice that isn't here is we don't have the count of all rows in the organization that we used to have. I'm pretty sure that they put this somewhere else. I will find it for you. I just forgot where it is. So in the data manager, we have some updates to the Connect tab. Under each of our different connections, I now have the ability to toggle on or off sharing inheritance, which is pretty cool. Nice, easier way to connect to that. And also now we do have the ability to add notifications based on runs of replication for warning failures and all events. The email recipient is not editable for this yet, but at least we can set these notifications now. Moving over to the data flow editor, we also have what is possibly my favorite new update for this release. We now have the ability under a filter transformation to just use SACWL directly. So previously to this, we had the legacy syntax, which is still supported largely for backwards compatibility, and it was a syntax that was not found anywhere else in the platform, and it was pretty inconsistent in its behavior, and if it failed, it just wouldn't throw any kind of error, it just wouldn't filter your data. So typically we would recommend a strategy of creating a compute expression that would filter the data the way that you wanted, and then just return true or false based on that, and only use the filter transformation at that point. So it was a two-step process, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now by default, we can just do things like, as the example is pointing out, stage name equals closed one, and that's going to filter our data for us. This is an outstanding update, and I'm very happy to see it. It wouldn't be a new release without updates to the Explorer, and we are definitely seeing some of those. The first one that I noticed, not really sure why, but they did change the number on the basic blue bar chart from the light theme to the dark theme. It still turns light on hover. I don't really know why they did this. I don't really have any strong feelings for or against it. But the next thing that we're seeing is this new filters tab. So let me show you how that works. And I'm using a different method of applying a filter than I usually do just because it's kind of a cool trick. I don't know if you guys know that you can do this one, but if you shift, click, and drag, you can actually then click drill down and focus to apply that as a filter. Nice trick. It's not a new thing. I just, I don't use it very often. I always forget that it's there, and it's pretty cool. But I'm seeing that filter that I just created showing up under this new filters tab. I almost feel that maybe query limit belongs over there as well. So now let's take a look at how these filters apply when we have different columns within a compare table that have different filtration applied. So now I'm going to clone this column here, and we can see that these filters, that applies to both sets of columns. Because it is it's kind of the global filter part of the compare table. And that's something that had previously confused me. It was difficult for me to tell through this UI if I was filtering one column or all columns. So then I'm going to apply a filter to just this column only. And, we'll say like whatever, gender equals female, and apply. And we do see a different set of numbers there. And I see that this filter is directly below the measure that it applies to, and not even on the same tab as the global filters that apply to all columns. So next, if we were to edit this column, we do have some pretty cool updates that we're seeing in the compare table. First, now when we hover over a field in the field section, we're actually going to see that field's API name within our data set. And we've talked in the past about how your compare table is like a slingshot, while your data flow is like a bow, and your SQL editor is like a trebuchet. And we use this analogy to say always use a compare table first for calculations. If you can't achieve those calculations with a compare table, try doing them in the data flow, and if that's not going to solve your problem, then write custom SQL for them. And what's really interesting right now is that it's just a fun shout out. In the compare table, we have what I'm calling the slingshot bug. So there's a bit of an issue where these tooltips don't de-render as quickly as they probably should. So if you scroll around, you can actually slingshot them up and down. You can get them all the way up to the top or the bottom of the screen based on how you're hovering and how you're scrolling. And it's a little tricky to control. Not exactly sure what's going on here. But the important takeaway from this is that we can now get the API name for the field that's being displayed in the field selector. So the next compare table trick, I'm actually switching over to a different data set, and I've got a timeline graph right here. This is showing coffee sales over time, and it's got this nice spike here that repeats. Well, that's some seasonality where our data actually has periodic spikes that occur at regular intervals over time. The data that you put into this does not necessarily need to have that. But now I'm going to flip back to compare table mode, because remember, we can always cleanly flip between compare tables and any visualization that's going to support the same number of groupings and measures that we have in our compare table. And I'm going to add a second column, and then I'm going to edit that column. Oh, this is so good. You guys are going to love it. And now under my functions, I've got time series. Time series is now in the UI. So I've got a bunch of different options. Well, what do they do? Well, I'm going to hover over to the tooltip, and it's going to tell me what the different options do. I'm actually going to leave seasonality and prediction model to default. It's going to look at my data and try to find the best thing that it can. And then it's going to allow me to select from any of the measures besides the one I'm editing for which one I want to apply the time series function to. And this is kind of a accuracy interval kind of thing. I have no idea what ignore last does. But this seasonality, although I am leaving it on auto, I do anticipate that it's going to find the seasonal spikes in the data for itself. So then I'm going to go ahead and hit apply and say, yep, do the thing, predict for me, show me what's going to happen in the future. No, you do not need Einstein Discovery licenses to do this, although if you have Analytics Plus, you get both of everything anyway. So now I'm going to close this out, flip back over to my timeline chart, And in addition to the sum of weight that I had before, I also have this different predictive line that's tracking the seasonality and projecting rows into the future. I may do an in-depth video on time series, or I may not. I don't think I really need to at this point, and the reason for that is because we have some excellent blog posts by Rikke that describe in depth how to do it. We also have an excellent webinar from Antonio over in Vidyard that both of these dive very deeply into what is time series and how do you get it to work. So I don't think there's really any need for me to do a video on it. I'm just going to put the links in the description of this one. But again, this amazing feature has now come to the UI and can be configured without writing a single line of SACWOL. Two really useful updates on the dataset field side. Now we do have the ability that when editing values on a type, it's just so much easier. We just have it all on one screen, whereas before you had to have this like scroll within a scroll, and you had to set the label and the name before you could, you know, create a or pick their color for it. It was just a really ugly interface. And you know, now we just have this nice, clean, simple view right here. We also have the ability when adding derived dimensions to edit their values as well, but I haven't been able to get this to work right yet. This next update is something that we have all been waiting for a very long time. This is a stacked bar combo chart where I have type as what I'm stacking by, and or type is the different columns that I have, and I'm stacking by channel, and I'm showing the total as a line on that. Now this is not as easy as just setting two groupings and picking one measure. The reason for this is because that would really have to be two different queries. And the reason why is because my line here is only being grouped by type, while my bar is being grouped by type and channel. And that would need to be two different queries. But we can do this pretty simply through the UI by setting up a compare table. So what I've got is I'm only grouping by type. And then for my first column, I have the total, and then I've got each of my different channels as different columns with filters applied and custom headers. And this does pose a bit of a limitation. You will need to know all of the different pick list values in order for your chart to display right, and if new pick list values are added or removed in the future, you would have to go and update your compare table again. But don't let this take away from the fact that we now have this extremely powerful chart type that we have been waiting a very long time to see. So in order to configure this, once you do have your grouping and your different measure columns picked out, what you're going to want to do is go to the chart formatting properties, go to combo chart, and what I've done is first I had to change the axis mode from small multiples to single in order for the stack bar chart option to become ungrayed. Then under the series options, I now have the ability to check the customize series box, which allowed me to pick the different measures that I wanted and whether or not they were going to be shown as lines or bars. And we get this cool animation when we flip back and forth between those two values. And by default, I did see that total, the very first column in my table, this was the only one that was actually being presented as a bar, and all of the other ones were being presented as lines. So I did have to go and make those updates, and I did get to see this cool animation along the way. I also had to update my left axis right here to have a custom title, because by default it was showing total, comma, drive-through, comma, store. And I'd like to change the word measure right here to say what the to say channel, to let us know what my fake grouping here is, and I think I can actually do that. No, I totally don't remember how to do that. I think we can do it somewhere. I do think that there is actually a SACWOL based approach to being able to dynamically pick from any given pick list what columns we need to project to, but it's actually pretty complex SACWOL to write. So I don't believe it actually fits into the context of a new release video. So I may or may not actually build out a proof of concept on this, and if I do, I'll either post it to the community or I will create a video about that, but I don't have any code written for this yet at this time. It is theoretically possible though. So if you don't like the compare table approach and you don't like the idea of having to write some fancy SACL to do it, you are not still left without this new insight, because if we look at the stacked bar chart, we now have the ability to show totals on the stack, which is going to give you the same information as doing it with the stacked combo and line is going to do. And we have the options to choose between absolute and net. I don't actually have any negative measures in this data set, so I can't really show you the difference. But what it does is if you select absolute, then if you had a -5 and a +7, it would show you a 12. Whereas if you select net, it would show you a +2. So we do still have access to this new insight. Hopefully in the future we might be able to just render those totals as a line. We can't do that today, but we do have the compare table workaround for the stack combo, which is still pretty cool in and of itself. So the next feature that we're going to be looking at is dependency in global filters. So we can see that I have applied type equals cold drinks. If I look at the weight options, I'm seeing 390 to about 5,600. And that's because it's already, before displaying me the options, it's applying the type equals cold drink filter to this result set. So if I uncheck this dependency, I've actually got a much wider range within my full data set, going from 160 to 9600, and I have the ability to toggle this feature on and off. So really great to have this. I also do especially like that it is toggleable. I wouldn't want to be stuck with one or the other. And one great use case for this is, for example, maybe I always want to show all opportunity stage values regardless of if I'm filtering to like created today, I very well might not see any closed ones unless we've got bad data in the system. But I would still want to see that as a pick list option. Or in a different use case, if a user filters to say last modified is before last week, and then they try to apply a filter of created date is greater than last week, they're automatically going to get no results found. Whereas with dependency turned on, they just wouldn't see that as an option to apply that second contradicting filter there. So really great to see this. And speaking of no results found, let's take a look at what happens now if we set a filter to result in nothing coming through on a number widget. Instead of showing no results found, I'm able to show a customized message, and this is going to be configurable under the number widgets option. So this has definitely been a feature request that has been coming up on occasion since the good old days, and people have done some pretty crazy stuff to get around that, usually involving projecting their number to a text widget using results binding. So while there are a ton of features that we haven't covered yet for the Spring 19 release, can't do everything in one shot here, but I do have one more spoiler for you before we wrap up for the night. So we're seeing an update on toggle widgets that we now have the ability to control the styling of them. So if I switch over here, create my toggle widget with a nice simple step on it. First, I've got the ability to customize the text, and basically everything that we've been able to customize on all the other widget types is now available to us. I can set the background color. I'm going to do borders on the top and on the right, set the width to 4, make it nice and round. Then we're going to set the border color to that same yellow. Additionally, if I want to see what the modifications for the selected tab are going to be, I first need to set single selection required, so I have one that's selected and I can actually see it. And then under here, I can make my text like a darker shade of yellow, and I can make my background color a darker shade of blue, and I can even make the border color that same darker shade of yellow as well. So there we go. Nice simple update here. We've needed it for a long time in order to really effectively use the toggle widget, which is extremely powerful. It's a great, easy to understand visualization that you can use it for static steps, for switching groupings, or you can also use it when you have it like this, where it's just coming off of a field. It's going to respect filters that are applied from other places in the dashboard. So there's actually a lot of really cool trickery that you can do with the toggle widget, and not being able to brand it to our dashboards was a limitation that held back its full capabilities up until this point. So that's the last update that we have for tonight. If you enjoyed this video, please come back for more spoilers in the future. Hit that like button, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching. Bicycle.